So welcome everyone. I am an associate professor at Edinburgh Napier University, and I also work in the mountain bike centre. So you guys are gluttons for punishment because you've just had one academic present to you and you've all chosen to come to another academic. So I hope you enjoy it today. So I'm going to present some data around e-bikes and diversity, and then we really want to break out and just have a bit more of a formal informal discussion, and hopefully we can capture some of that information as we go through today as well. So thank you for coming along. But I thought it's always good to give a bit of an introduction, right? I'm not just an academic. I've been cycling since a very young age. Still smiling. I kind of fell into sports science, and this is our lab back in Edinburgh, and this is me doing a test on our treadmill there. So we've always been really keen to make science applied. Yes, so we are not the kind of academics that are going to sit in our office and not have conversations with any of you. We want to get out there, we want to live in the real world, and we want to understand those problems and try our best to try and capture some of those problems. So that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. As Kevin said, I was also fortunate, so I managed to race some World Cup cross countries. I managed to get out to Valwar and race some EWSs as well. So I've done a fair bit of riding, but knackered knees and bodies, and we won't go into that any more detail. It's very much for leisure and for fun these days. But I'm a sports scientist to trade, and I think this is one of the reasons that I really got into mountain biking, was working with the athletes. So I've really enjoyed over the years working with people to make them better. So to give you a snapshot of some of the things, if someone says to you, this can be your office for the day, yes, I want that office. This is at Fort William at the World Cup in Scotland. We've got Greg Williamson, who's an elite downhill World Cup rider, so we used to provide all the support for them. This is me at the Commonwealth Games track for the cross country in Glasgow, so supporting an athlete there. So we're looking at video analysis to get better lines. And this is me working with Mark Beaumont. So I both tested and coached a rider called Mark Beaumont. I don't know if you'll know him or not, but he currently holds the record for the fastest circumnavigation of the world. So lots of different things, lots of different challenges, but I guess that's kind of like what being a scientist is. So nice and applied. But what I really like in terms of mountain biking is I love all of the different aspects of how you can get involved in it and how we can get involved in it in research. One of the key things that I'm really interested in is diversity and how we can really start to push this forward and make this sport more accessible for more people, because we all know it's great, but we want to tell that story, right? And we want to share that with other people to make sure that they all know it's great as well. Okay, so the plan for today is, if you never felt like you're at school again, it definitely feels like you're at school. I'm going to give you just a bit of a snapshot of some of the data that we've captured. So I've got some qualitative data and also some quantitative data, but it's quite nice to mix both of those things together around e-bikes. And then you're going to have to visualise your round table because we don't have any tables, but we're going to break up these seats and we're going to have a bit of a discussion about some of the key points from the presentation. I'm not sure if we're going to have time in order to be able to feed any of that back today. We'll see how it goes. If we don't, we're going to have the ability via the app, and I will put out a summary afterwards as well. So we'll make sure that that gets shared out further and wider as well. Okay, so I just wanted to set a little bit of the scene, where we're at currently with e-mountain bikes. So currently it's estimated that the e-mountain bike market is worth $6.49 billion. The forecast of that growth is to $11.73 billion by 2030. So we're still seeing, we're still predicting that's going to continue to increase. In the research that is out there, so we've got some nice research that was conducted by Shimano, and they reported that 52% of Europeans believe that e-bikes are for individuals that are conscious about the environment. We also see that females might actually choose to purchase an e-bike because they're worried about the level of the physical activity, so they might actually prefer that as an option in order to be able to get involved in these sports as well. And we're starting to see some really nice research now that e-mountain biking is actually helping us to prolong our cycling, how long we can actually cycle for, and I'll present some of that data to you today. Okay, so the first study that I want to talk to you about is a study that we did in GB. So we sent out surveys. We collected 1,341 valid responses from that surveys, and we'll just have a little bit of a snapshot of the demographics. So We got data from England, from Scotland and Wales. That representation is probably, in terms of those percentages, is probably quite a good representation of the people that are living in those countries as well. So it was nice to see that as well. From that, 20% of the riders were female, 79% of those respondents were male, and 1% didn't disclose gender to us. And again, we're sort of seeing that data come up quite continually now within mountain biking, so it appears that it's quite similar in the e-mountain bike market as well. What was quite nice about this survey was 76% of the respondents had e-bikes and were already engaging in it, but 22% of the respondents were curious about e-mountain biking. So it shows that we have a space where people are interested in getting involved in the sport, and we might be able to increase this market ever so slightly. In terms of just a little bit more of the breakdown of that, so 96% of the individuals were white who replied to the study. And we see that sort of elongated age range again, so 35 to 64 was where the majority of respondents were in terms of the age bracket. And really interestingly, 15% of the respondents noted that they either had a disability or a long-term health condition. So when we look at that in terms of like other sports, that's actually much bigger than what we would see normally in sports participation. And those riders definitely like some different things. So they said that they liked riding in forest paths. They liked trails that were more trail rather than your sort of adrenaline, enduro, gnarliness. So we're starting to see a little bit of difference in terms of what riders actually want in those spaces as well. 60% of those riders had been mountain bikers for over a 10-year period. So it's suggesting that the riders that are moving into the e-mountain bike space have previously ridden, and then they're elongating that by e-mountain biking, and 63% had e-mountain bike for less than a 2-year period. So suggesting that it's still quite a relatively new discipline. When we asked the riders, what sort of level would you say that you were at, 63% of them said they would classify themselves as an intermediate rider. 70% identified as trail riders rather than cross-country, enduro or downhill mountain bikers. And 72% of the respondents said that they could find and ride on the types of trails that they wanted. So it suggests that people are fairly happy in this space. They're being able to access the things that they want to. And the other really interesting thing about this is we also asked about the seasons, and what we're seeing is it's not changing how often people ride when they have an e-mountain bike. So on regular bikes, we see often in the winter that can reduce the amount of time that they're cycling for, but across all seasons, the participants were cycling for, there was no significant difference in any of that data. So suggesting we can cycle for a little bit longer. We also asked those riders their motivation, and they said that they liked play and mental health was the main reasons that they were motivated to ride. We are now seeing this, Tom presented it in his European mountain bike study, we're seeing it in e-mountain bikers. Play, fun, mental health are the key things that are driving people to get into these spaces and to partake in these sports. Interestingly, we are starting to see differences in terms of why people also want to ride. So females reported that they much preferred riding with family and friends, and that actually was one of the biggest motivations for them also to ride. So that connection that we're talking about and that connectedness is also playing a part in that as well. And risk was the least important thing. And I think this is a really important thing for us to keep saying out loud, because I think everyone that thinks about mountain biking sort of goes, oh, it's risky, don't do it, you're going to hurt yourself. And actually, you're not, yeah? It's all about being coached properly in order to make sure that you are safe when you go into these spaces. And I think, the more that we can push those messages out, the better that's going to become. But with the e-mountain bikes, the main barrier still is cost in order for people to get into that. And I think, that sort of makes a lot of sense when we see those bikes. We also asked a little bit about the respondents' riding habits, and they reported 83% said that they could ride further than what they would on a normal mountain bike. 79% said that they could ride faster, that they could complete more laps, and they could do more technical uphills. So slightly changing in terms of what they can actually do on the bike as well. We also tried to establish a little bit, so we did this work with British Cycling and some other stakeholders, and they were really interested to know, are e-mountain bikers just going to go everywhere in our landscape, and what are they going to do? And they kind of wanted us to try and look through this data to see if they were misbehaving, I guess. And we looked at the data, and what we found, and we asked some questions around that, and what we found was everyone was a little bit naughty some of the time, okay? So no one was bad all the time, but sometimes people would maybe cut a corner, or maybe they would ride a desire line, or maybe they would scoot up a bit of an uphill, but no one was doing that sort of behaviour all of the time. But there did seem to be a bit of a consciousness about when they went out into more natural habitats in that space, that they were, if it was wet, they were maybe choosing not to go to those trails, etc. So again, that environmental consciousness seems to be playing a bit of a role there. We also asked a little bit about conflicts and what people had experienced on the trail, and 11% of the respondents said that they'd experienced more conflicts on the trail since they'd been e-bikers. The leading things on that was people calling them cheats, saying that they, but also some of the conflicts were arising with other users where actually it was the speed differentials that were catching people off track, and it was giving them a fright when they were approaching them, etc. And we're really keen that, we think like one of the key areas and the ways that we can help to develop that is to make sure that we are educating people as well. So if you are working in hiring e-bikes and or in coaching, that we're making sure that we're saying on the trail side, there are certain rules like to obey and to follow, and people might not hear you, but there are some really easy ways to ring your bell and just be, remember your trail etiquette. But I guess one of the things that we need to remember in this population too is we've got a lot of maybe new people who are curious about this sport, who have never done it before, who might not have any of that trail etiquette as well. So maybe as a community, that's where we can all work with those guys in order to be able to help to promote that a little bit further as well. Okay, so the conclusion so far from that, I think I'm doing okay in time so far, is what we can see from e-mountain bikes is it can keep us all cycling for longer, so we're starting to see that older age range within that. It appears to increase participation in individuals who have disabilities or long-term health conditions. It can improve our mental health. But what we are not really seeing any change in that data yet is the amount of women or more marginalised groups. We're not seeing any increases in the numbers of those individuals that are participating currently. But we're going to talk about how we can change that in a few slide times. You've got to bear with me a little bit more. Okay, so that was all the qualitative data that I've just presented to you, and that was where we went and we asked people questions. But we've also been working on some data with Strava Metro, so they've given us access to their data. And what I want to present to you now is just a little bit of a case study. So this is from Glentress, which is in Scotland. It's about 30 minutes south of Edinburgh. It was the first trail the first trail centre in the UK. It's got about 150 kilometres of trail there. And you guys will be familiar with the grading system. So we've got green trails, we've got red trails, and we have black trails. They're in this indented box here. There are some new trails that were first released in 2023. And they are more bike park type trails, so more gravity led than the other ones are definitely more cross-country based. But we also have in that area quite a lot of what we would refer to as unauthorised trails, so where trails have been put in for maybe races, for enduro races, etc. There's quite a lot in that natural forest. So just give me a little bit of context because I'm going to break up some of those things as we go through this data. Okay, so this data that I've looked at, the first part of the data I'm going to give you is over a 5-year period. So it's inclusive of 2000 up to 2024. And we're from the site data, we were seeing we had 595 1,000 riders, 90k were female, 503k were male, 2k didn't identify from the data that we can establish from that. So interestingly, that's slightly lower than what we see reported. So that's working at about a 15% and an 85% for the males. So slightly lower in that female demographic than what we get when we ask questionnaire-based data.
Can I interrupt? Is this to do with just because it's GPS tracks, it's people's tendency to track their ride?
Absolutely, it's exactly what I was just about to say. Come on, Mark. And I think that's the caveat that we have to remember about this data, right? This is people who are logging their rides on Strava, and not everyone wants to do that, and they're not interested in doing that. So it's not the whole trail user group that's here, but where it's exciting for us is I think it's given us a bit of an insight to the trail use more than what we've ever been able to see before, if that makes sense. So it's just, rather than having one trail with a counter, we can actually look at these big areas in a little bit more detail. So that graph is like a bit bad, but probably for you to see, but this age group here is 18 to 34, and then the darker one here is 35 to 54. So again, it looks like the similar age groups at what we've been reporting with mountain bike riders. Okay, so this is broken down by year, okay? The light blue is mountain bike use, and then the darker blue is e-mountain bike use per year. So what we can see from that is both disciplines are continuing to increase, so that's great. This is the number of laps that are ridden on all of those trails, just to be clear on that. So the number of laps that are ridden are continuing to increase, which is great. We've got people there, they're lapping, they're having fun. What we can see is, so that's from 2000 to 2024, it was a 48% increase in mountain bikes, and it was an 800% increase in e-mountain bikes. So we've definitely got that growth happening quicker in the e-mountain bike market, even though it's slightly lower. But what I want to do is to focus in a little bit more on that e-mountain bike use specifically, rather than that comparison for the rest of the slides. So first of all, what I did, and again, this is from that 5-year period that we're looking at just now, just had a look to see where these riders are riding. And we could see that the black trails were where most of the e-mountain bikes were riding. So we had 81,000 laps, as opposed to 76k in the red and 73k in the blue. Again, interestingly, so for the green, I couldn't extract green routes out of Strava. The only green routes that this is showing you is from the new bike park trails. So to go back to Mark's point, you know, the riders that are riding those sort of things, we can almost make an assumption that they are not recording that. So, you know, we're missing a little bit of that key data in terms of that site use as well. I then broke that down a little bit to have a look. So based on that description that I gave you first of all, so the old cross-country trails, the new bike park trails, and then the unauthorised trails. So the first column there is old cross-country, and then it's the new bike park, and then it's the unauthorised trails. So the old cross-country over that 5-year period are still the most ridden trails where the most laps are occurring on e-bikes. But as I said, those new trails only came in 2023, and we only really have like one full year of data on those in 2024. So let's go and have a look to see what's happening now. And what we see when we break that data down into 2024 is that you can't differentiate between black, red, and blue trails for e-mountain bikers. So they're riding exactly the same trails. And when we look to see where they're riding for the first time, the new bike park trails have overtaken the cross-country trails. And we can actually get to the point where we can pull out what the favourite trails are, and these are all the trails that are within the new sort of more gravity-led bike park section. So it appears that when people are riding e-mountain bikes, they're looking for that shorter lap so that they can maximise the amount of downhills that they can get. So to give you a bit of context for that site, across a full cross-country lap of the red would be somewhere around an hour and a half. You could, lap up and do one of these new bike park trails in about 40 minutes. Well, it would be quicker on an e-bike because I was on a regular bike when I did that. So both of those were regular bike times. But just to give you a bit of a context of the difference of what people are obviously looking for. So in terms of the conclusions from that, we can conclude that mountain bike riders are still riding more laps in comparison to e-mountain bike riders. However, that growth is higher in e-mountain bike riders. Those e-mountain bike riders appear to prefer that shorter lap where they can maximise their downhill within that trail centre. And the data that we have access to at the moment is really indicating that there's very little change in terms of that diversity that we're talking about and that we're really hoping to see on the trail. So you'll be glad to know that I'm almost about finished speaking. I just want to thank the organisers at IMBA and the Mountain Bike Kingdoms for organising the event. It's amazing. I've never been to this area before, so I feel very lucky. You can tell I'm Scottish and I'm very hot, yeah, but I mean it was freezing when I left, so it's one extreme to the other. I wish I'd got in our environmental chamber at work. Just thanks to our colleagues and all of the partners that we've worked with over the years in collecting this data. So now what we are going to do is... Oh, sorry.
Any immediate questions on your presentation?
Perfect, thanks.
Thanks for putting your energy into that last discussion. Makes it great for all of us, everybody takes part. You've now got about 10 minutes fresh air time and before we reconvene for the next breakouts. But finally, Leslie, thanks very much. Great session, really neat. See you soon.